Hey everybody, good morning. Hey, nice to see you. It's currently 2:33 in the morning. I was just woken up by the baby, doing typical baby stuff in the middle of the night. Scrolling through my phone, checking the video out, looking at, that's pretty good. Ooh. There's a lot of dissenting opinions on the previous video, to say the least. So I want to take a moment here in this video to further clarify my stance, give you more context as to why I think the way I do. And if you did not watch the previous video, you probably should before you watch this one. But just in case you didn't watch it, my stance is of that Helldivers 2 is in need of a balance patch. Now, why do I think that way? Well, before I get to that, and before I reiterate the points that I made in that previous video, I want to just clarify. The number one comment on the previous video is, of course, as I could expect, skill issue. You're playing solo in a co-op game, buddy. What do you expect is going to happen? Or, oh, you're playing on a higher difficulty as a low level, and you're expecting this to happen and that to happen. You need to get this stratagem, use this armor and this weapon, and you shouldn't be detected there, and blah, 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 blah. Instead of people actually, addressing the points that I'm making in that video, they're just saying, oh, you're essentially, you have a skill issue because you're playing solo in a co-op game. It's like, bro, what? Sorry. The devs wouldn't have let you play solo in a co-op game if it wasn't intended to be solo in some capacity, And why I bring this up is because a lot of people are misconstruing what I'm saying. You think that I'm trying to say, oh, I want the game balanced as a solo player. No, I want the game balanced. Period. Not as a solo player. I don't want anything tailored towards solo play. Except if you go watch that video, every single point that I make in the video is not difficulty dependent and not solo dependent. Well, I guess the one respawning, because I made a point about when you respawn as a solo player, you can get directly back on top of the enemies you just fought. I guess that one is definitely solo specific. But the other ones, not even difficulty dependent, not solo dependent whatsoever. So for you guys to say that, you're just blatantly incorrect. I'm sorry. And need I remind you that I am level 13. My character level is 13, and I am clearing level 8 difficulty missions. I'm about to unlock the highest difficulty in the game as a solo player. Obviously, I know that I'm signing myself up for a harder challenge. Obviously, guys, you don't have to tell me that. Thank you very much. Quite frankly, I do not need your advice, so keep it to yourself. Thank you. All right, moving on. Let's go back and rehash the points that I made in that previous video. Again, my points were, number one, explosion damage is bugged or just outright inconsistent. I don't know which one it is, but it just doesn't feel good whatsoever. Number two, when you're standing behind solid objects, again, explosions that come in can knock you down. You could be on the other side of this solid object and then just get knocked down as if the explosion was right next to you. Number three, the ragdoll physics of explosions, not specifically the spore traps, which a lot of people are harping on. Like, oh, it's a spore trap, skill issue, man. You didn't know what the spore traps are. No, I know what the spore traps are and say it literally in the video what they are. It's just the amount of ragdoll physics from the explosions is ridiculous, needs to be toned down. That was my point. The fourth one was that respawning when you die in a mission. It's crazy how you can just spawn back on top of enemies. And fifth and finally, when you are choosing to spawn in at the initial point of the mission, it should tell you where all of the groups of enemies currently are on the map so you can better determine where you spawn in. Those were my original points, and I feel like, again, a lot of people are not actually addressing those points in general. They're just going and clicking on the video, seeing that it's a solo Helldivers 2 player, and they're like, oh, dislike, oh, this guy can't play solo, play this game this way. It's intended to be co-op, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, man, so let me go back and actually give you the context for those thoughts. So the first and foremost one was that explosion damage is bugged. I am still not convinced. Some people had some pretty decent counterpoints there, but again, my conclusion is that explosion damage has to be bugged, straight up. And in that video, again, I want to reiterate, I was wearing the heavy armor, which is supposed to give you 50% damage reduction to all explosions. There were times where I was direct impacted. There were times where I was hit on the back. Some people were speculating that the backpack blows up when you get hit by explosion damage and then you die because of that. There were times where I got hit in the front and instantly died. And there were people speculating that, oh, you were missing HP on your vital areas, not your overall health. So your overall health looked like it was like, 75% full, but in reality, your torso only had like this much health. So when you took any damage to your torso, you instantly die. But that doesn't explain that I literally died at full health in those clips. If you go back and watch them, that doesn't explain that. So many inconsistencies with explosion damage. I am convinced that it is bugged in some capacity. This is not for you or I to decide. Thankfully, it's up to the developers to go and figure that out. The second point was that getting knocked down when you're behind solid cover, that just should not happen, period. Thankfully, I don't think anyone was defending that point, so we can move on from that one. The third point, which is a pretty big one, again, the ragdoll physics from specifically the explodey traps I used as an example in that video, but the ragdoll physics in general are pretty overtuned and can lead to some very frustrating situations. Cool if you want the ragdoll physics to be crazy, it's supposed to be a silly game, right? Orchestrated chaos, as someone put it in the comments. I get that. However, if the ragdoll physics are going to be that crazy, could we maybe get like a delay to when they happen, as in like a random bullet strikes the traps? Okay, cool, I have no control over that. It's gonna blow up and knock me back, cool, but at least give it like a pulse, like maybe a 2-second pulse, like whoo, 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 then it blows up. Like would that ruin the game? No. Is that a solo specific thing? No. Like, I don't see how that would harm the game whatsoever. I just feel like the ragdoll physics are way overtuned. So probably look at that. The fourth point was that as a solo player, this is the only solo point. When you respawn into the middle of the fight, you can be surrounded by enemies. I really don't see how that's justifiable. Like, I get the whole point of dying. You should be penalized for that, as someone put it. But you're already penalized if you choose to not spawn near the enemies because you dropped your special weapon and you dropped your samples on top of the enemies. So you're going to have to try and fight through it anyway to get your stuff back. So you're already penalized. I think it's just asinine to justify being able to spawn literally back in exactly where you died, surrounded by all the enemies just for you to die again. I feel like that's just an incredibly bad take. And fifth and finally, when you're choosing to spawn in at the initial point on the map, when you're at your big global screen in the middle of your ship, you should not be able to spawn in on top of enemies. I'm sorry, that should not be the case whatsoever. And if you actually look back at the video, the specific example I used in the video, I dropped on a point of interest, which has predetermined spawns on it. How did my massive ship doing this giant scan of the area, how did that miss the enemies on the ground right there? I'm sorry, but it just doesn't make sense. A lot of people are saying, oh, it's a skill issue, buddy. You dropped in on the enemies. You have to fight your way out. You should have used your orbital strike there, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't change the fact that I literally should not be spawning on top of enemies. That's just stupid. I'm sorry. There's no way to justify that. It's just a stupid take. Spawning on top of enemies. Why would that happen? So to wrap things up here, again, I am not asking for the game to be tailored towards me and my specific playstyle. I'm not asking for the game to be tailored towards solo players specific. None of that is the case. If again, all those points, none of them are dependent on the difficulty specifically. There's literally 0 of them, and only 1 of them was dependent on solo play. The rest of them can be broadly applied to the game as a whole, and I think the game would only be better off because of it. Again, that's my goal. I want to make the game the best possible version that it can be. I really enjoy the current state of the game. The moment-to-moment gameplay is excellent. The gunplay is excellent. The environment is excellent. The sound design is insane. That's actually a critically underlooked aspect. The sound design is you like actually firing the weapons and the shots coming in and the explosions and the voice acting. A lot of people don't talk about that. It's excellent in this game. There are so many things going right for Helldivers 2. I just want to see it taken to that next level to truly break through as an absolutely excellent game. So there are a lot of other things I could talk about. Maybe I'll make another follow-up video, not in terms of like the previous video, but like an entirely separate video talking about more balanced things that I'd like to see, or just more changes to the game in general. Maybe just like my general thoughts. So let me know if you want to see more stuff. And please, please, please refrain from the comments trying to misconstrue what I'm saying here. It's nothing to do with me playing as a solo player. It's everything to do with these actual issues that I believe are in the game. If you disagree that they're actually issues, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear those opinions. You guys are just typing, oh, skill issue solo player. Just stop. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I gotta go back to bed. Baby's about to be done feeding. Peace.